So thank you for being here with me. I am Melissa Schwartz. And for those of you who are new to my work, I want to just give you a little brief understanding of who I am and why I'm here talking to you about highly sensitive children and raising them. I am an author, I'm a public speaker, and I am a coach for parents of highly sensitive children. And I work with families all over the world to help parents and professionals understand what it is that's going on for these sensitive children, because very often their behavior is misunderstood, they're acting out, they can be very challenging to be with. And I say all of that because I was one of them. I grew up in a family where both my parents were teachers. My mom in particular was an early childhood specialist, and my older brother was really easygoing. Everything my parents did with him seemed to work. And so when I was born 4 years after him, they were kind of puzzled by my behavior because nothing that they did with me seemed to work. I work with my mom now, which is why I say this a little bit in jest. When she and I do public talks together, she often talks about how she really thought there was something wrong with me because, when my brother was a little toddler and she would say, "Don't touch that," he would listen. When my brother was a child and she gave him food, he would eat it. When my brother was little and they would take him places, he behaved. And none of that seemed to work with me. When they would tell me not to touch something, I would look them dead in the eye and touch it anyway. When they gave me food, I would shriek, or so I hear, that it wasn't presented the way that I wanted, or it wasn't on the plate that I wanted, or it looked yucky, or it smelled funny. When they would take me places, I would often cling to my mom's leg, or, be really slow to warm to things, or not want to engage in new activities. And so I grew up with the message that there was something wrong with me. I really did. I always knew that I was different from other people. I mean, we're all different from each other, but I knew that there was something about me that was different than my brother, and I could never really pinpoint it. And so I spent a lot of my life kind of looking for answers and trying to figure out what it was about me that was driving this differentness. And when my mom retired from her career as a teacher and child development specialist, she began teaching college classes and teaching workshops for parents. And she would talk about what the experience was like raising these two very different children. And when the workshops were over, parents would come up to me and they would ask to talk with me because I sounded just like their child. And so I knew that there was something else going on here. I knew that there was something bigger than just me being kind of a pain in the ass kind of a kid. And as I did my own research into understanding myself, I realized that I was highly sensitive, that there was actually a term for this temperament trait. High sensitivity is not a medical diagnosis. It is not something that needs to be treated or fixed. There's no remedy for it because there's nothing wrong with being highly sensitive. It is just a way of experiencing life, just like having blue eyes or brown eyes. It's something that you're born with. Now, the difference between high sensitivity and eye color is that high sensitivity is challenging. To be highly sensitive is challenging, and to live with somebody who's highly sensitive is challenging. And so that's really where my work as a parent coach took off. Since then, my mom and I have written a book together called Authentic Parenting Power, and I really contributed to that book because I brought the child's point of view, the child's voice into that book. So where my mom wrote from the perspective of a parent, I gave this other point of view of why a child could be so difficult to be with, why they might be acting out the way that they are. And I continue to do that in my work today. I authored another book, which will be out in a few months, called Under the Hood. And that book really speaks more to high sensitivity and sensory processing disorder. I'm not really going to get into that today because that's a whole other story in itself. But I have really become one of the world's leading experts in understanding high sensitivity and sensory processing disorder and helping, again, parents and professionals sort out what it is that's going on for these children so that they don't get the message that there's something wrong with them, so that they are not mistreated or misdiagnosed or mismedicated. Because what happens so often for these children is their behavior is misunderstood, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And then we look at those bigger behaviors and symptoms and want to treat those things without getting back to that root of the high sensitivity. So today what I want to do is give you a couple of secrets that will really transform the way that you look at your sensitive child, that will help shift the way that you interact with your child, and ultimately change your child's behavior. Because, when I work with parents, they want their kids to be happy, but at the end of the day, they want their kids to not be breaking down. They want their kids to not be having tantrums. They want their kids to eat and be kind and get through the day without falling apart. And so while that is the end goal here, we're going to get there by really transforming your understanding of these kids and why they're behaving the way they are and what they really need in life. So before I dive into the secrets, I want to welcome everybody. I see a few more people just got on. I want to let you know that there is a chat box. You're welcome to submit questions or comments as I go along. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it. If you want, you can choose just to send a message directly to me. This session is being recorded, so if you're watching after it's live, thank you for joining me wherever it is, whenever it is. You can always email me a question if you have it, but if you want to keep something private so that way people that are watching the recording don't see it, feel free to send me a message directly and I'll see that. So let's dive into some secrets that will give you some new understanding of your children and how to transform your experience with them. The first thing that I want to share with you, and I already sort of alluded to this in introducing you to who I am, is that you don't have to change who your children are. So often when we are dealing with a sensitive child, we think that we need to make that child be different for them to be okay. And I'm telling you, as an adult who got that message as a child, it didn't work. It didn't change who I am. All it did was set up beliefs about myself that I had to undo later in life. I grew up thinking I was too sensitive, too intense, too reactive, just too much. And the truth is, I was reactive and I was intense and I was sensitive, but I wasn't too much of any of those things. And when we give a child that they're too sensitive rather than highly sensitive or more sensitive than other people, it sets up this flawed belief system in them that there's something wrong with who they are and they need to change to be okay. And I want to say that your child was meant to be the way that they are. They are meant to be highly sensitive. They are hardwired perfectly for the life that they're meant to live. And I'm telling you this because I want this to soothe your heart and soothe your worry that something has gone wrong or that you are not equipped or able to raise this child. Even though it might seem like something has gone wrong, it hasn't. This child chose to be as sensitive as they are. And from some energetic, unconscious soul level, you chose to be their parent. And everything here has gone actually perfectly right. And I can say, as a highly sensitive now adult who has gone through this journey with my mom and actually been able to turn it into our work, our life's work, there is amazing growth that's going to happen here. In other words, when you are raising a highly sensitive child, they are in your life to catalyze your own growth. And you are in their life to teach them how to handle living in this desensitized world, because the world is not going to change for them. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. I don't live in a world that's set up for highly sensitive people. I've learned how to curate my world as an adult so that it works for me as best as it can. But when I'm out in the world, I know that it's not set up for me. And I know that falling apart is not the way to get my needs met. And I've learned how to set healthy boundaries as an adult, how to ask for what I need, how to give myself downtime, how to really care for my sensitive body and energetic body and soul in ways that I can handle life without falling apart. But I wasn't born with it. These kids are not born into life knowing how to handle it. That's where you come in. That's what they're really asking from you is mommy, daddy, teacher, grandparent, whoever you are in the life of a child, help me understand how I can be okay as I am. And so I want you to keep coming back to this, knowing that you don't have to change your child when you get worried, because when this is your bedrock, when you know that nothing has gone wrong, when you know that this child is exactly as they're meant to be, you can really soothe a lot of your worry and your angst and your anxiety and your stress, because then you don't have to try and change them. I want to give you a metaphor here to really kind of tie it in. And if you've heard me speak on podcasts or you've worked with me privately, you may have already heard this. When, for example, if you go to buy a car, you get to choose what kind of car you want. Do you want to buy, for example, Prius, which is kind of a low maintenance, low needs, sort of a low performance car? Or do you want to buy something like a Porsche, which is a high needs, high performance, high maintenance, demanding car, right? You get to choose when you go buy a car. Do you want to put in a little bit of investment, a little bit of commitment to maintenance, and have a car that's going to get you from your house to Target or from your house to school? Or do you want to make a bigger investment, a bigger commitment in a maintenance schedule, and have a Porsche, which is a really fun, flashy car to drive, right? You get a different performance from each of those cars. They have different purposes, okay? The difference between a child and a car is that when you go to buy a car, you get to choose what you're investing in, what you're committing to. And when you are a parent, you don't get to choose the hard wiring of your child. And so if you've got a child who is highly sensitive, congratulations, you've got a Porsche of a child. I'm like a Porsche. And my easygoing older brother is more like a Prius. And that's why being with these easygoing children, and there's no judgment or value implied when I use those terms, just like there's no judgment or value implied when we talk about a Prius or a Porsche. They have different purposes, okay? You might not want to be driving a Porsche to Target and to school to drop off the kids, and to Home Depot to put plants in the back of the car. In other words, there are different benefits to each of them. So one is not intrinsically better or worse. They are intrinsically different. And the same is true with our hard wiring. Our hard wiring, when I keep using that term, I want to just clarify, when I talk about hard wiring or temperament, I'm talking about the way that we experience life. We are born into life hardwired to have certain temperament traits. There are like 8 or 9 traits of temperament. My mom and I go into them in the book that we wrote, Authentic Parenting Power, kind of in detail. And as you put these 8 or 9 traits together, and they show up in different saturations. So for example, sensitivity is a temperament trait. Intensity is a temperament trait. Probably your children or your grandchildren or whoever it is that you're on this webinar to learn about are probably very saturated in terms of sensitivity, very saturated in terms of intensity. I see that Pamela can't hear me. Can everybody else hear me? If you can't hear me, please do let me know, and I want to make sure that that you can hear me okay. On my end, it looks like it's coming through all right. So if you have a child who is hardwired in a particular way that is more challenging, more complex, more intense to be with, congratulations, you've got yourself a Porsche. Now, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that child. It does, however, mean that that child needs more from you to perform optimally, to give you the ride that you're looking for. Okay, if you have a Porsche and you don't maintain it, you don't put the right gas in it, you don't balance its tires or keep things inflated in the way that it needs. I don't really know a lot about cars, if you can't tell. That car will not perform the way that you want. Whereas a Prius doesn't care what kind of gas you put in it, doesn't care if it's got a spare tire, doesn't care if there's a crack in the windshield. It's going to perform in the same way. A Porsche has bigger needs. A Prius has less specific needs, and so it doesn't require as much to function. That's the primary thing that I want you to take away in this first secret. Nothing has gone wrong with your child. You don't have to change them. What you want is to come to understand who they are. You want to come to understand what kind of body, what kind of car they are in, so that we can meet their needs, okay? The second secret that I want to give you is that when your sensitive child breaks down, and it will happen regularly, it's actually a gift. And I know you might be rolling your eyes at me right now and saying, Melissa, it's not a gift. I was in Target yesterday and my kid lost it, or my teenager came home from school hysterical that she doesn't have any friends, or whatever it is. I promise you, these challenges are gifts, and here's why. If you can see a challenge with your child as a gift, as an opportunity to connect with them, as an opportunity to create a closer bond with them, as an opportunity to help that child be able to navigate life in a new way, then you can relax. Then you can shift the way that you're thinking about things. Then you don't have to try and keep your child from ever having a breakdown. Breakdowns are going to happen. They're part of life. We're human beings. Even a child who's hardwired like a Prius, who's really easygoing, they're still going to have breakdowns every now and then. The breakdown is not indicative of how well you're doing as a parent or of how well this child is doing in the world. The breakdown is indicative of, does this child have all of the tools that they need to navigate life? You know, as an adult, I still have breakdowns. They're not out in public. They're not as intense. When I have them, I know that I'm lacking something in my life to help me cope with whatever it is that's going on. They happen. We're human. We are constantly learning. We are consistently growing. We are endlessly evolving, and we never get it totally right. We never are done becoming more of who we are. And so if you have young children and these children are breaking down, what it really tells me is that there's an opportunity to give this child a new tool in their personal toolbox so that they can handle whatever it is that's going on in life at that time. If the child had whatever tool they needed in that moment, they wouldn't be having that breakdown. So I want to really clarify that point that even as adults, when we are having a breakdown in life, when we are struggling in a certain moment, it's not because we're bad. It's not because we're flawed. It's not because, we're doomed or we're unloved or life isn't fair. It's because we don't know how to do it any differently in that moment. In other words, the behavior itself, the breakdown itself, is actually communication that in that moment, that child is struggling. That's why they're having a hard time. They don't know how to do it differently. So if we go back to this idea of the cars, right, of the Prius and the Porsche, and we're looking at your sensitive child as a Porsche, I want you to start to think about their misbehaviors, their breakdowns, their tantrums, their shrieking, which I know is unpleasant. I'm not saying it's pleasant, but I want to start to look at it through new eyes, through the eyes of like a check engine light on the car, okay? If your car, nowadays, brand new cars have a million check engine lights and things that are going off all the time. And if on your car, a light went off telling you that the tire pressure needed to be checked, you wouldn't be angry at the car for telling you that the check engine light went off. You would say to yourself, oh, something is wrong in this car. It needs my attention. Let me get in there and meet whatever need is telling me is not being met in this moment. The same thing is true with your child's misbehavior or their outbursts. Those behaviors are telling us that they need something in that moment, okay? And I want to really empower you in this moment by saying you can actually become the mechanic for your child. And the way that you do that is by you building your own toolbox of tools and understanding and learning how to read your child's specific check engine lights. Because each child has a different dashboard, okay? And I also want to say that depending on who your child is, if your child is highly sensitive, if your child has some sensory processing issues, if your child is displaying some anxiety or depression or oppositional defiance, in other words, depending on the age of your child, we're going to see different behaviors. Depending on what's going on in your child's life, if if you've been divorced, if there's been a death in your family, if you've moved, if your child has experienced a trauma, a major trauma or a minor trauma, their check engine lights will look differently. So one of the things that I want to help you do is begin to understand what it is that's going on for this child, what's lighting them up. Because when we can do that, when we can come to understand why they're behaving the way that they are, then we can use these as learning opportunities. Then we can say, oh, this child needs something in this moment. They don't know how to express what it is that's going on here. I was with some friends last week, and they've got a couple of small children. And one of the older ones, about 6 or 7, hit his little sister, about 3 or 4. And I kind of looked at him and I said, whoa, you got really angry at her, didn't you? Yeah, I did. She took my toy. Oh, she did. She took your toy. Or maybe it was, he had built something out of some like blocks and she knocked it down. I didn't want her to knock it down. I said, you didn't want her to knock it down. You got really angry that she knocked it down. And I want to say that one of the best ways to help these children, and I'm sort of jumping ahead in my secrets, I'm going to circle back to this point, is to really help them process what it is that they're experiencing. Because especially these sensitive kids, man, they just have this emotional rush. They have an emotional reaction, and they don't always know how to express it in the way that we want them to. And so if they are acting out, if we can actually go in there and talk about it with them and process it with them, then we are giving them a huge gift to do it differently. We are giving them new tools to have in their toolbox so they don't have that same breakdown the next time. So I want to very quickly say here, and I'll share more about this later, that I am actually going to do a 6-month group coaching program that sort of looks like this, where I'm going to be doing these live interactive webinars, one each month over the next 6 months, where I'm going to give you more of these tools. I can't give you everything today. Today is really kind of an overview that I want you to have some new understandings that you walk away feeling empowered. And then over these next 6 months, I'm going to give you more of these specific tools so that you have them in your toolbox to really use with your children. Because in order for you to be able to embody the secrets I'm giving you today, to really trust that you don't have to change your children, that challenges are gifts. In order to really know those things, you've got to have some concrete tools to go along and support those beliefs. And so I want to let you know that even though I can't give you all of those tools today, that I am going to give them to you over the next 6 months. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in this session. I want to share one more little story with you here before I move on to the third secret. And that is, when I was younger, I have these vivid memories of being in the car with my older brother and sitting in the back seat, and he would just put his little pinky over the line in the middle of the seat that kind of divided us. And I remember screaming, "Stop! He's on my side of the car!" Which I'm sure if you've got multiple children, you can relate to them screaming, shrieking in the car. For some reason, the car is, it's just fertile ground for siblings to kind of go at each other. And I have this memory of my mom turning around and saying to me, if you would ignore him, he would stop doing it. And I remember thinking, but I can't ignore him. I don't know how to ignore him. And as an adult, I know that she was right in what she was saying to me. In other words, one of the things that I've learned as a highly sensitive adult is, yeah, sometimes in life I do have to ignore the metaphorical pinky over the line. But for children, there is a gap between this logical understanding and them embodying it emotionally, them being able to actually do what we want them to do. And that is one of the places where I see most parents need some tools. If you're just joining me now, or if you're new to the work that I do private coaching with parents all around the world, and I give them these tools because it is not easy to bridge this gap between intellectual understanding and emotional embodiment. In other words, telling a child to calm down or to ignore what's bothering them, yeah, That is what we want them to do. And yeah, as highly sensitive adults, that is what we do when we're healthy and we have the tools to do it. But your child needs you to bridge that gap for them. They need help to go from ignoring their sibling who's bothering them to being able to do it. And that's where so many parents feel powerless and feel like, Melissa, I'm doing what you're telling me to do. Why isn't it working? I'm telling you why it's not working. There's a little bit of a bridge that has to happen. There are a couple of tools that your child needs, and I want to say with love, that you need. And here's why. Most of us were not raised in households where we were given these tools. And that is not a judgment of our parents. That is not a blaming of our parents. They did the best they could. I want to say that high sensitivity is newly researched. It's only been about 25 years, I think. It was in 1996, so a little over 20 years, that Elaine Aron wrote her first book called The Highly Sensitive Person, that had all of this research that now I use in my coaching and in the research that I'm doing. And so our parents didn't know what we know now. We know more than they did. And they're not bad for it. But what it means is we have to learn more to be able to give it to the children. We don't have the tools that their behavior is begging for. Okay? So I want to reiterate that when they are acting out, when they are challenging us, they are gifts in the making. They are opportunities for us to figure out where these kids need some new tools and give them to them. These are opportunities for us to bridge the gap between intellectual understanding and being able to do it emotionally. And you are not bad for not being able to do it. Your children are not bad for not being able to do it. It's just where we all are in the moment, okay? And that's part of why I created this 6-month program that I can't wait to tell you about, because I want to give you these tools. And up until now, I've only really been doing giving these tools away in private coaching. And I've heard from so many parents in this last year that are asking for this stuff. And so that's why I put together this group program, so that I can give these tools on a bigger scale, because I know many parents can't afford to work with me privately. And I also don't have the time to work with all of the parents that want to work with me. I only have room for a couple of new private coaching clients in this next year. And so that's why I'm giving these tools away here. So let's move on to the third secret. And that secret is that, and this is a hard one, because most parents ask me, like, what do I do when my kid is falling apart? What do I do when my daughter is hysterical that the kids are mean to her, or my son is hitting his sister, or she's shrieking because I told her no ice cream, or whatever it is. And I want to say, regardless of what age your child is, whether you have a toddler or a teenager, your power is not in the moment of the struggle. It just isn't. Your real power is before the struggle happens and after the challenge takes place. And here's why. Well, let's start with the after, and then I'll come back to the before. Here's a sort of a fourth secret, I suppose. Highly sensitive people are slow to process. That's one of the common traits of highly sensitive people. And so if you try to, in the moment of a challenge with your child, help them process what's going on, you are in big trouble. They are too emotionally worked up. The parts of the brain that are firing do not allow for logical, rational thought. Their body chemistry is off the charts, and they cannot handle, they can't handle the processing in that moment. So let's go back to the example of me in the backseat of the car with my brother as a child. There are things that my mom could have done to help us avoid having those challenges, okay? There are all sorts of ways that she could set things up to help us keep our hands to ourselves, to encourage us to cooperate in the car. Those are all sorts of different tools that I'm going to give you, in a different session. The after part, the processing part, would be when she was tucking me in at night to say, You got really upset when your brother put his hand across the line in the car today, didn't you? Yeah, mommy, I did. It really felt like he was just torturing you, didn't it? Yeah, it did. In other words, validating that child's experience afterwards, after they've had a chance to calm down. That does so many things for that child and for your relationship. It creates connection between you and that child. It helps them feel understood. It helps them feel seen. It gives them the message that there's nothing wrong with them for having had that big reaction, which we already talked about. That is part of who this child is. And they acted that way because they didn't know how to do it differently. And by helping that child process the experience on the back end, when they're calm, when they're in a more soothed place, you are helping build their toolbox, okay? That's where the tools come in. If you try and stop things in the midst of the experience, in the middle of the challenge, you're going to find yourself frustrated, and that child is going to find themselves frustrated, and you're just going to throw your hands up and say, this doesn't work. I just feel powerless. Things shouldn't be this way. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. In that moment, it does feel like that because you are powerless in that moment. That's not where your real power is, okay? Your real power is in knowing how to set up life to lessen these challenges, to lessen these experiences from happening. And then using these experiences when they do inevitably happen, because we're human, as learning opportunities, okay? These breakdowns, these challenges, these tantrums, they are not parenting failures. They are opportunities to learn. I'm just reading Heidi's question here quickly. Perfect. That's totally it. So if you wait until the evening and bedtime, so I want to say bedtime can be challenging for a lot of parents because parents are exhausted, kids are exhausted. If your bedtime routine isn't really working and it's hard to get your kids to go to bed, it's really challenging to do this processing with them at night. But I want to say, if we can make some tweaks in what's going on in your day-to-day life and we can turn bedtime into an opportunity for connection, it is so, so, so wonderful. It's wonderful for you as the parent to go to sleep feeling like, yeah, I did great today. I put my kid to sleep and I felt connected to them instead of going to sleep feeling like a shit parent, feeling like you did something wrong, feeling bad about the way that you handled a challenge, having your kid go to sleep feeling ornery or angry at you or disconnected. They're going to wake up feeling that same way. If you can go to bed at night and help your child calm down and talk with them about their day and connect with them, you can go to bed feeling good. That child can go to bed feeling good about the challenges that they experienced in the day and not like there was something wrong with them, okay? So much of what I'm talking to you about today is really about you as the adults shifting your mindset, shifting the way that you're looking at this child, having new tools and resources to support you being able to do that. And consequently, what happens is your child feels differently. They feel like you're seeing them through a new lens. They feel understood in a new way. And then they can really embody the tools that you're giving them so that they can wake up the next day feeling good about who they are. And that will create fewer and fewer breakdowns, less and less intense breakdowns. This is not going to happen overnight, but it's a process. It's kind of like losing weight. You don't lose 20 pounds in a day, but if you do the work, if you do the hard work, after 30 days or 60 days, you're like, wow, I lost 20 pounds. How did that happen? It's this consistent effort over time where eventually you're going to find yourself in this new place. And it's all of these small little changes along the way. So I want to add one more little metaphor here to kind of tie in this car parallel. And the reason why I like talking in metaphors is because sometimes it's easier for us to see things, to make these brain connections for ourselves when it's not tied directly to your own child, because very often there are these emotional connections that it's hard to be able to see things from outside of what you're experiencing. Like, you might be hearing someone I'm saying be like, Melissa, that might be true for other people, but it's not true for my kid. My kid has a breakdown. There's no learning opportunity there. There's no gift in my child's tantrum. I don't know what you're talking about, right? So I want to say that, if you have For example, if you're driving your car and your car runs out of gas, when your car runs out of gas is not the time to be empowered. Yes, there are certain things that you can do in that moment to get your car running again, but it's like waiting for your kid to have the breakdown and then trying to fix it in that moment. There's not a lot of power in that. Your power is in noticing the low gas light coming on your dashboard and doing something about it then. And I want to say that most children show us these little indicators before they have the big breakdown. And one of the things I'm going to help you do is begin to read your child's dashboard and begin to see where their lights are lighting up so that before they run out of gas, you can refuel them, okay? So that way you don't find yourself in these crisis moments. Now, I also want to say, if your car does run out of gas, then you can reflect on it afterwards and say, oh, I was busy talking on the phone. I didn't notice the gas light come on, There's still good learning to be had, even if you run out of gas. The running out of gas doesn't mean that you're a failure, doesn't mean that you're a bad person, doesn't mean that there's something wrong with this car, okay? So when we can just take a little bit of a step back from the behaviors and start to look at them for what they are, which is communication, then we can really approach them in a new way. So I want to say that, that as we move through this program that I'm going to tell you about in just a little minute, that you are going to get better and better at, one, having the tools to use before the chaos reigns, right? But also getting better at reflecting on what it is that happens with your child, because so much of the teaching, so much of the learning really does only come after the breakdown happens. We can't always prevent a breakdown from happening, but we can always learn from that breakdown, okay? There is always a gift that comes out of it if we're willing to look for it. So I want to reiterate that the first secret I gave you is you don't have to change your children. They are meant to be as sensitive as they are. The second secret is that the challenges that show up are gifts. They are opportunities to learn. And the third secret, and this is really the most important one to take away, is your power is not in the moment of the struggle. It just isn't. You are not going to be able to make any successful, authentic, really substantial shift in that child's behavior in that moment. You are not going to be able to give them a real tool that they're going to embody and take away in the moment of the struggle. It's going to come in the reflection of it. And that's primarily because we are deep processors as highly sensitive beings. And so when you process with your child, and this is something that I see a lot of parents skipping because it's uncomfortable. It takes us as the adults really soothing ourselves to go back and talk about the experience in a calm way, being willing to look at what's going on for the child. Another place where I see a lot of parents struggle looking at, at a challenge through a new lens is when a child lies. Very often parents get caught up in lying is wrong. We don't lie. But stay with me here. If you are willing to look at why a child lied and to talk with them about why they didn't feel safe telling you the truth, or why they lied to a teacher, whatever it was that happened, there is so much opportunity to help that child do it differently next time, but also to build closeness and connection. And I want to say that that so much of what I teach is, yes, it's to change your child's behavior. Yes, it's to make your life easier. But ultimately, it's to help your child grow into an adult who moves through life with integrity, with compassion, with kindness, and who wants to be in your life when they're adults. I've seen in friends that I have, parents that I work with, they don't talk to their parents. They don't talk to their siblings. They don't want to be in those people's lives because they felt disrespected as a child. They felt misunderstood. They weren't, They weren't given what it is that we're talking about here. And when you show up with this sort of respect and compassion for your child, when you model the very behavior that you want them to display in the world, they're going to want to be in your life forever and ever. I know that for sure. Because when a child feels seen by their parent, when they feel understood, they don't have to lie to you. Lying is a protection mechanism. A tantrum is an acting out a need for something that isn't being met. And when we start to look at these behaviors through this new lens, and we help that child process why they were acting that way, what a gift. I want to say here, and I hope that you're laughing along with me as I say this. This is the way that we keep kids out of therapy as adults. This is the way that we keep them from needing to work through childhood issues as adults. This is what we all wish that we had as children. If we had had it, we'd be able to give it away to others. But most of us weren't raised with it. And we're not bad for it, and our parents aren't bad for it. They did the best that they could too. And now this new generation that's raising children gets to do it a little bit better. And I want to say that if you can do even a little bit of this with your kids, you don't have to do this all the time. You don't have to do it perfectly. There's no standard for doing this. It's slowly integrating it. It's like, if you want to lose some weight, you don't have to go on a crazy diet. Maybe you just stop eating bread, or maybe you add some more greens to your plate. Whatever it is, these small little changes add up and make a big difference, okay? And doing these things, you are going to raise a child who's emotionally healthy, who can handle life, who doesn't have these breakdowns. Because the truth is, the world is not set up for highly sensitive people. It just isn't. And the world is not going to change to meet their needs. And it's not supposed to. But what we can do is teach these highly sensitive children how to be resilient, how to show up in life by meeting their own needs first, by setting healthy boundaries out in the world, by expressing what it is that they need from other people in ways that they get their needs met. And then they don't have to act out to get their needs met. All of these misbehaviors are attempts to get their needs met. That's really what's going on underneath the surface. So I've alluded to it a little bit, and I want to say here that if you are interested in learning more of these tools and really implementing them, I've created this program. So over the next 6 months, on the last Monday of every month, I'm going to do a webinar just like this. And in each of the webinars, I'm going to give you some new tools that you can take away. And these webinars are based on tools that I know that parents need. And I know that based on the coaching that I've been doing, the Facebook group that I run. I'm not sure how it is that you came to be on this webinar, but there are all sorts of different ways to work with me, interact with me. If you've gotten this by email, I'm going to send you a couple of resources via email. If you haven't sent me your email, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I'll send you a couple of resources when this session is over. But I want to say that what I see happen for so many parents is that they feel inspired by what it is I'm talking about here. They feel super pumped up. They're like, yeah, I got this. But then they try and do it on their own without any support, or they read a book. To me, it's almost like watching a cooking show and then going into a kitchen without actually having a recipe. I'm going to give you those recipes and walk you through it in the kitchen so that you can actually implement these tools and feel confident owning them. That's part of that disconnect I was talking about earlier, going from the intellectual understanding to really being able to implement it with your children, to showing them how to use these tools, to using them yourself, because all of the tools that I want to give you for your children, I want to give them to you also. Okay, we can only teach others what it is that we know ourselves. So these tools that are for your children are also for you. These are ways for you to manage your emotions, to express yourself with more kindness and compassion. And so I really want to encourage you to continue working with me over these next 6 months so that I can give you all of these tools to help you and your children thrive. I want to say that for those of you who are watching this, I'm offering a discount on this coaching program. So when I release this program to the public, it's going to be $199 for the 6 months. For those of you that are on this call live or watching the recording, it's $99. I'm also offering a monthly payment program. So if you don't want to pay $99 up front, you can pay $19 a month for the 6 months. And the last thing I want to say is, if money is the only thing keeping you from doing this program, please let me know. You can send me an email or a private message here, because I don't want that to be the thing that keeps you from being able to do this work. You know, I've worked with all sorts of coaches and teachers, and I do all sorts of workshops myself because I'm a work in progress too. And I don't have all of the tools that I need for myself. You know, I've learned these tools progressively over the years. And I personally know that it actually ends up not really being, for me at least, about the money. When I've been hesitant to join a program or to commit to a process, it's really been because I wasn't committing to the work, because I was hesitant about doing what it is that, you know, the teacher or whoever it was encouraging me to do. And I want to say that the tools that I want to give you are things that are just absolutely going to transform your life. And these are the secrets that will change your child's behavior, that will change the way that you feel moving through your day-to-day life. There is not one easy, quick fix. If there was, I'd give it to you. I want to say that there are these little, small, quick fixes that when you have them over time will absolutely transform your life. When I work privately coaching parents, I typically work with them around like 8 sessions, somewhere 6, 8, 10, 12 sessions, depending on what it is that's going on for a child. And so what I've done is kind of condensed what I give to parents in my private coaching down into 6 sessions that I'm going to give you over these next 6 months. The way that this program works is the sessions will be live and they'll also be recorded. So you can join me live if it works for your schedule. You can watch the recording at any point, whether or not you join me live. You're welcome to email me questions in advance. You're welcome to ask your questions during the session, although in advance is usually helpful because that way I can see the common threads that parents are having. So this is really a tailored program for those that are participating with me. And I also want to say that even doing one private session with me will cost you more than this entire coaching program. So the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to make these tools and resources accessible. I want you to be able to use this information. And again, it's not about the finances. If that is what's keeping you from joining this program, please let me know. If the thing that's keeping you from joining this is like, there's a knot in your stomach, like I don't want to have to do what she's telling me to do, I encourage you to sit with that and really wonder, like, what is it that's holding you back from learning these tools? Because I promise you, it is not as hard as it seems. And as you learn what your child's behavior is indicating to you, you will feel empowered to shift it. It is so much more empowering to move through life having these healthy tools than to move through life feeling like I just can't do it. The world isn't set up for me. You know, I remember having the insight not that long ago of like, oh my God, my mom was right. If I could have ignored my brother, he wouldn't have bothered me. Like, what a concept. But it took me most of my life to learn how to ignore him. It took me learning all of these tools and skills to be able to have that ability to ignore what it is that upsets me. And so that's really what I want to give to you here. So I want to say that that I honor you being here. You know, being here and listening to this session. You know, I always say to the parents that I'm coaching, like, just being on this call with me tells me that you're a good parent, because what makes you a good parent is your desire to do more for your child. It's your desire to shift the way that you're responding to them. It's not about doing it perfectly all the time. It's about wanting to do it better. Okay, that's what your child is really asking from you. And that's all that we can really give them, is our desire to do it better, our desire to learn a little bit more, our desire to grow with them. So I want to thank you for being here with me. And I want to say that I want to really encourage you to sign up for this program with me, because I promise you that this investment that you make, this, it's for some people it's a small financial investment. I know for some people $99 is a huge financial investment, but I promise you it will pay you back in dividends. It will transform your family. And I know that this will be the bedrock that you'll always return to, because no matter how old your children are, these tools will work for helping them be more regulated in their emotions, more grounded in their sensitivity, and more prepared to move out into the world as adults with compassion and kindness and confidence. So I want to thank you for being here with me. I'm going to send out an email after this session is over that will have all of the information to sign up for the program if you want. And if you've got any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them to me in an email, and I'm happy to bring them into our first group coaching call. Yes, everybody will get a replay link. If you have not already emailed me, please email me at melissa@leadingedgeparenting.com. I'm going to type it in the chat box for you right now, actually. That way you're going to have it. I hope that you can all see that. I'm also going to give you, that way, just in case anybody is like feeling super inspired, here are the links where you can sign up for the group coaching program. You can sign up for the one-time payment of $99 or the 6-month payment of $19 a month. This special pricing is only going to be good until Thursday. On Thursday, I'm going to release this program to the public, and it's going to be at the price of $199 or $39 a month. So if you're feeling inspired, I really encourage you to sign up now. Like I said, this is going to be a tailored program where I give you tools that I know that you need, but it's also going to be based on the feedback, the questions from the parents who participate. So thank you again for joining me. It's my pleasure to share this information with you. And I want to thank you for raising healthy, highly sensitive beings. The world needs them more now than ever. And so I really appreciate you being here and you asking for this information. And it's just my honor and my life's work to be able to give it to you. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye for now.